San Francisco has perpetually been a tapestry woven with tales. Some resonate with a vibrant intensity, etched in the neon glow of taverns and the soft whispers of nocturnal dialogues. Some remain silent, hidden behind sealed doors, anticipating direction. Is it mine? The tale began with Julian's arrival. For years, I have been leasing the quaint apartment located just downstairs. A simple yet inviting one-bedroom, complete with a functional kitchen, mere steps away from my own front door. It's ideal for the youthful spirit, embarking on a new journey, seeking a vibrant start in a city that pulses with endless energy. And what of Julian? He embodied that very essence. He arrived one afternoon, suitcase in hand, his posture wavering, yet still exuding a presence that compelled me to glance again. He possessed youth, beauty, and a physique that seemed to be sculpted from fantasy. He stood tall, his deep brown skin radiating warmth beneath the California sun, with short, tidy hair and shoulders that pressed against the fabric of his unassuming t-shirt. His gaze met mine instantly, deep and inviting, yet harboring a subtle intensity beneath his reticence. He was not boisterous as many young men tend to be. He exuded a quiet assurance, free from arrogance or excessive self-importance. Yet, when he uttered a sound, his voice resonated with a deep, smooth cadence, each word seemingly selected with deliberate care. "I came across the listing," he remarked, adjusting his hold on the suitcase. "Is the apartment still up for grabs?" I smiled, absorbing his presence. "It varies. Will you be able to make the payment punctually?" He gave a swift nod. "Indeed, madam." That brought a smile to my face. "Let's skip the formalities, shall we? Feel free to refer to me as Vivian." He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Yet, gradually, a smile crept across his face. That smile spelled trouble. Thus began the journey. In the initial 2 months, Julian embodied the ideal tenant. Consistently courteous, unfailingly respectful, and punctual with the rent payments. He toiled relentlessly, enduring lengthy shifts at a downtown company where he was merely an intern, laboring for meager pay as he endeavored to carve out a future for himself. He exhibited a remarkable sense of discipline and dedication, though perhaps he carried a weight of seriousness that seemed unusual for someone of his years. Yet, it was precisely that quality of his that I found appealing. There was something captivating about observing his comings and goings, often catching glimpses of him in the early hours, shirtless in the hallway, towels draped casually over his shoulder, his skin shimmering from the remnants of the shower. I appreciated the sight of his muscles shifting under his skin, the way he held himself, powerful yet understated, as if he were unaware of his own striking allure. There was something endearing about the way his voice resonated with gratitude, especially when he expressed thanks for the small gestures, like mending a leak in the apartment or navigating the perplexing parking regulations of San Francisco. I found him appealing. Yet, I never ventured beyond the boundary. Only after he provided me with the justification. It began with a whisper. One evening, he rapped on my door, an air of awkwardness surrounding him, his hands buried deep in his pockets. "Miss Vivian," I couldn't help but smirk at that. "Vivian, I have made the corrections." He gulped. "Indeed, Vivian." He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "I would like to discuss the matter of the rent with you." I rested against the doorframe, my arms crossed over my chest. "What is there to say about it?" He averted his gaze for a fleeting moment, his fingers tracing the nape of his neck in a gesture of uncertainty. "I find myself in a rather precarious predicament. The work I engage in, it remains merely an internship. It will be another 2 months before I receive proper payment. All I require is a bit more time." When his gaze found mine once more, I sensed a vulnerability within him, a flicker of hope mingled with uncertainty, a subtle yet palpable desperation. I allowed the silence to linger, observing him as he shifted on his feet, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way he prepared himself for my response. I might have chosen to decline. I might have pointed out to him that this was a business, that rent was not a matter of choice. Instead, I inclined my head, savoring the moment, pondering his presence. "It has been 2 months since I inquired." He gave a swift nod. I will cover it all, down to the last penny. All I require is a moment to myself. The air was thick with unvoiced potential, a palpable tension suspended in the silence between us. With a soft sigh, I shook my head, a hint of amusement escaping in my breath. Very well. His whole being seemed to unwind, a sigh of relief escaping his lips in a swift exhalation. My sincere gratitude. I raised a hand, interrupting him in the midst of his words. I will allow you a week to resolve the matters at hand. If the situation remains unchanged, we will explore other options. His brows knitted together, a flicker of uncertainty shadowing his features. What are the options available? A simple smile graced my lips. He refrained from posing any further inquiries. Not at this moment. 7 days slipped by. Without funds, there can be no resolution. Only a jittery Julian and an entertain me. As twilight descended, I rapped gently on his door. I spent a leisurely moment preparing, selecting an outfit that was both casual and thoughtfully chosen. Silk cascaded over my form, a gentle touch against my skin, secured just loosely enough to evoke a sense of ease, comfort, and mastery. I was anything but subtle. I had no intention of becoming that. The door creaked open, and his face became a mask of stillness. His eyes darted to the ground. For just a fleeting moment, there was hardly a pause. Yet, I managed to seize it. I observed the subtle movement of his throat, the gentle curl of his fingers against the doorframe, as if seeking stability in that moment. "Vivian," he faltered, shifting beneath my scrutiny, his hold growing firmer as if he sought something to anchor himself to. I entered with a smile, not pausing for an invitation. This is my domain now. The guidelines I adhere to. It seems the moment has come for us to have a conversation. He swallowed hard, closing the door with a deliberate motion, his body rigid as I glided by, the silk of my robe barely brushing against his arm in my wake. Thus, we must explore an alternative approach to resolve this matter. His brows knitted in concentration. Could you clarify what you mean? I released my breath with intention, measured and calm. To be frank, it seems you find yourself in a rather precarious situation, one that doesn't lend itself well to negotiations, does it? Julian parted his lips, only to seal them once more. A mysterious glimmer danced just beyond the surface of his gaze. I moved in a fraction, allowing my essence to permeate the air around us, letting the gravity of the moment envelop him. Take a deep breath, I urged gently. My voice steady and serene. I'm not seeking anything unreasonable, yet I believe it's time we re-examine your circumstances. His breath caught ever so slightly, his muscles tightening beneath the fabric of his thin t-shirt. The warmth of his skin emanated beneath my fingertips as my hand gently settled on his shoulder. He remained close. And that revealed all I required to understand. Are you certain you wish for me to elaborate on this? I inquired, tilting my head, my lips mere inches from his, feeling the warmth of his breath enveloping me. He remained silent. He remained still. Thus, I pressed my lips against his. Julian tensed the instant my lips brushed against his whole form becoming taut as if he were uncertain of how to respond. I anticipated a moment of doubt, perhaps even some reluctance, yet I was aware of a truth he remained oblivious to. He desired this with the same fervor that I did. I sensed it in the way his breath hitched in his throat, in the way his hands fidgeted at his sides as if he were battling the impulse to reach for me. I allowed him the time he needed. The kiss hung in the air, gentle and intentional, my lips brushing against his with a languid, playful insistence. I sensed the instant he surrendered, the instant his muscles softened, the instant he breathed out and allowed his instincts to guide him. His hands, hesitant yet curious, settled on my waist. His fingers lingered softly against the silk of my robe, barely clutching as though he feared the consequences of a tighter grasp. I intensified the kiss, angling my head, allowing my fingers to glide up his chest, sensing the solid muscle beneath his shirt. His skin radiated heat, his body coiled with tension, the restraints loosening with each fleeting moment. As I finally withdrew, his lips hung slightly ajar, breath coming in uneven gasps, and his pupils dilated, fixed upon me in a moment of stunned silence. "It wasn't as daunting as it seemed, was it?" I whispered, my fingertips grazing softly along the nape of his neck. Julian swallowed with difficulty, shaking his head in disbelief. He left it incomplete. I refused to allow him. I kissed him once more, this time with intention, pressing my body against his, sensing the hitch in his breath as my robe slipped open even more. His hands clasped my waist with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine, his fingers digging into my skin as if he had at last come to terms with the reality of the moment, surrendering to the inevitability of what was unfolding between us. A soft, tremulous breath escaped him as I leaned closer, my lips gliding along his jawline, my fingers slipping beneath the edge of his shirt, exploring the defined contours of his abdomen. His body trembled beneath my fingers, his hands clenching around me before descending lower, grasping my hips in a manner that ignited a thrill along my spine. He hesitated, gripped by a lingering fear that kept him from seizing what he truly desired. I was not. I grasped his hands, leading them to the places I desired, urging him to release his thoughts, to abandon reason and simply embrace the sensations. He let out a sharp breath, his composure slipping, his body trembling with the effort to hold back. "Vivian." I pressed my lips gently against his neck, savoring the warmth of his skin just beneath his ear, a slow and intentional kiss that spoke volumes. "Cease your pondering, Julian." His determination shattered. His hands glided with newfound confidence, gripping, exploring, and discovering me with every caress. His lips met mine once more, filled with certainty, devoid of caution. His kiss was fervent, insistent, his body pushing me backward toward the couch until I could feel the cushions pressing against me. His weight pressed down upon me, igniting a surge of adrenaline that quickened my heartbeat. The strain that once bound us had finally shattered, leaving us unencumbered and free to pursue what lay ahead. Julian's breath came in ragged gasps, his chest heaving as he loomed over me, his form coiled with tension. His hands, once tentative, now clasped my waist with a subtle intensity, fingers sinking into the silk of my robe, his warmth radiating through the delicate material. My fingers roamed freely, following the defined contours of his back, sensing the tautness of his muscles as he struggled to maintain his composure. His physique was robust, each part of him chiseled through hard work and dedication, and yet in this moment, he stood before me, trembling, undone, entirely at my mercy. His lips met mine once more, the kiss now bold, no longer tentative, no longer uncertain. His hesitation had vanished, supplanted by a deeper yearning, a palpable hunger. His hands glided gently, tracing the contours of my waist, drawing me nearer, his touch now assured, intentional. I inhaled sharply against his lips as he lifted me with ease, his power undeniable as he settled me onto his lap. His hands anchored me, fingers entwined, pressing, asserting, his breath warm against my neck as he nestled his face there for a fleeting moment, as if seeking to find his footing. A palpable desire radiated from him, evident in the tightness of his jaw and the way his hands flexed against my thighs, as though every bit of restraint demanded every ounce of his remaining control. I traced my fingertips gently along his arms, sensing the tautness of his muscles beneath my touch. "Claude," I murmured, my voice playful, filled with breathless anticipation. He released a sharp breath, his fingers pressing in just a touch more firmly. "You're making this incredibly challenging," he murmured, his voice taut, laden with an emotion he was struggling to contain. I smiled, allowing my hands to glide beneath the hem of his shirt, my fingers dancing over his stomach, sensing the way his abs tightened beneath my touch. "Am I?" His breath caught in his throat, his hands clenched tightly, and then, in an instant, his determination shattered utterly. His grip transformed, fingers gliding upward, drawing me closer, our bodies colliding with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. His lips met mine once more, the kiss growing deeper and more fervent, his fingers weaving through my hair, our breaths intertwining. The warmth of his skin pressed against mine ignited a spark, each movement of his body responding to my touch, every fiber of his being now attuned to me, and neither of us had any desire to halt this unfolding moment. The night dissolved into a whirlwind of sensation, a dance of touch, soft gasps, and silent comprehension. His hands roamed, discovering my form with each measured, intentional stroke. His lips traced paths of warmth across my skin, his breath a heated, trembling whisper of desire. Time faded into oblivion, leaving only the raw sensation, the electric feeling of him beneath my fingertips, the heat between us intensifying, escalating, devouring all else in its wake. Julian possessed strength, yet he approached me with a gentle caution, his touch unwavering and deliberate. Even as his breath trembled and his fingers gripped mine with increasing intensity, I found myself enveloped in a sensation of unparalleled vitality. As we sank back onto the couch, our bodies entwined, breaths deep and content, the night had gracefully slipped into the early hours of morning. Outside, the city lay in serene silence, with only the gentle murmur of distant cars punctuating the tranquility. Julian reclined next to me, his arm casually resting on my stomach, his chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. His fingers danced lightly across my skin, tracing absent patterns, each touch deliberate and contemplative, as if he were committing every detail to memory, even in the quiet aftermath. For a moment, silence enveloped us, until at last, he released a soft chuckle, a slight shake of his head accompanying it. "That took me by surprise," I said with a smirk, tilting my head to meet his gaze. "Was it so?" He breathed out, his fingers gently gliding along my waist. "Not particularly." I lifted my hand, gliding my fingers through his short hair, savoring the gentle softness that met my touch. "Will you be able to meet my gaze tomorrow?" He chuckled softly, a bemused smile playing on his lips as he shook his head. "I'm uncertain. Perhaps it would be wise to refrain from making eye contact for some time." I leaned in, my lips grazing his jaw with a delicate touch, just enough to sense the tension ripple through him, his body still responding to my presence in this moment. Softly, I murmured against his skin, "We'll discover the truth of that come morning." For some reason, I sensed that this would not be the final encounter. The first sensation that greeted me upon waking was the warmth that still enveloped the space beside me. The atmosphere in the apartment was heavy with his lingering fragrance. Skin, sweat, an unmistakably masculine essence that had woven itself into the very fibers of the couch. The gentle morning light seeped through the blinds, creating elongated shadows that danced across the room. Julian shifted beside me, his breath remaining deep and even. His arm lay languidly across my stomach, fingers gently curled against my skin, as though he had succumbed to slumber while still embracing me. For a fleeting moment, I found myself simply observing him. His face bore a serene expression, lips gently parted, his body intertwined with mine in a manner that felt effortless, unhurried. The uncertainty that lingered last night had vanished, supplanted by a serene calmness, a gentle ease that enveloped the moment. I moved just a fraction, and his hold instinctively grew firmer. His eyes slowly opened, heavy with remnants of slumber, and for a fleeting moment, he simply gazed at me. Then understanding dawned upon him, and he exhaled slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Alas!" A sly smile crept across my face. "Wishing you a delightful morning as well." Julian let out a gentle laugh, his fingers wandering lightly along my side. To awaken in such a manner was beyond my anticipation. I brushed my fingers through his short hair, observing the way. His eyes fluttered shut at my gentle caress. "Are you expressing discontent?" His lips formed a subtle arc. "Absolutely not." His voice, still tinged with the remnants of slumber, was low and warm, sending a languid shiver down my spine. I appreciated the sound of his voice in the morning, the effortless grace of his movements, and how he instinctively drew me nearer, completely unaware of it. I inclined my head, letting my lips graze his jaw, savoring the faint stubble that had emerged during the night. His breath caught in his throat, his grip constricting once more. "You're going to land me in hot water," he murmured. I smiled slyly against his skin. "In what way?" He let out a soft sigh, adjusting his position until his body was pressed against mine, his hands gliding lower, exuding a newfound confidence, a sense of familiarity. "Because," he whispered, placing a gentle kiss on my shoulder, "if you continue to gaze at me in that way, I won't be able to rise from this couch all day." I chuckled gently, trailing my fingertips down his spine. "Perhaps I prefer that you refrain from doing so." Julian let out a sharp breath, shaking his head as if to reclaim a semblance of control. "I have responsibilities, Vivian." I traced my fingers along his chest, sensing the gentle rhythm of his breath as it ebbed and flowed. "Not for several more hours." His body coiled with tension. I sensed the precise instant he surrendered. The morning faded into a languid embrace, a gentle sweetness enveloping the day. In contrast to the frantic pace of the previous evening, this moment unfolded with a gentle ease, marked by languid caresses, tender sighs, and the serene discovery of a body that, while known, still held an element of thrill. Julian retained his strength and dominance, yet there was an additional quality that had emerged. There was a certain ease, a comfort in his movements, in the way he embraced me as if he wasn't quite ready to release his hold just yet. Perhaps I wasn't, in truth. As I finally extricated myself from the embrace of the couch, the sun had ascended to a loftier position in the sky. Julian stretched, his form unapologetically exposed, muscles rippling as he released a deep, lingering breath. He extended his hand toward his pants, a subtle shake of his head accompanying the motion. "This isn't how I envisioned my week unfolding," he murmured, slipping them on. I arched an eyebrow, fastening my silk robe casually around my waist while leaning against the counter, observing him intently. "Are you feeling remorseful about it?" His gaze darted to meet mine, deep and inscrutable. He shook his head slowly, a gesture steeped in contemplation. "Not in the slightest." A deliberate, understanding smile unfurled upon my lips. "Excellent." Julian brushed his hand across his face, his gaze fixed on me, as if he were grappling with the bewildering circumstances that had led him to this moment. "What comes next?" I inclined my head, pondering his presence. "Indeed, it varies." He arched an eyebrow. "What about it?" I moved nearer, allowing my fingertips to glide over his arm, sensing the tautness of his muscles once more. "Regarding your decision on continuing to pay rent?" I whispered playfully. Julian stood still, his gaze shifting with an enigmatic intensity. In that moment, he erupted into laughter, a shake of his head accompanying the sound. "Goodness, Vivian. Your candor is truly striking, isn't it?" I allowed a sly smile to play on my lips as my fingers glided down his chest, only to withdraw moments later. "Not when I desire something." His eyes deepened with intensity, his jaw tightening as he released a breath. "What is it that you desire?" I leaned in, placing a soft, lingering kiss on his lips, then whispered softly, "You will find a way to navigate through this." Before he had the chance to utter another word, I pivoted and made my way toward the bathroom. As I walked away, I could feel his gaze lingering on me, a mix of desire and the unspoken understanding that our story was far from finished. Far from it. Weeks slipped by, and still, Julian remained. Not in any formal capacity, at least. His apartment downstairs remained, yet it had transformed into little more than a storage unit, devoid of the warmth of a true home. His garments gradually ascended to the upper floor, his toothbrush found its place beside mine, and his fragrance clung to my sheets long after he departed for the day. Each night, he returned to my side. It had evolved beyond a mere fling. Initially, I reassured myself that this was just a fleeting phase, a moment of pleasure, a rare indulgence after years of restraint. Yet Julian possessed a remarkable talent for weaving himself into the fabric of my existence, to the point where I ceased to ponder his presence. He remained ever vigilant. His fingers would wander, tracing absent-mindedly along my waist as we lost ourselves in the glow of the late-night movie. His gentle tug, drawing me close in the soft haze of morning, as he lingered in that dreamy state between sleep and wakefulness. His form seamlessly fitting against me. His gaze lingered on me, a silent testament to his reluctance to release what he held dear. I found myself equally unprepared to part ways with him. One evening, I discovered him in the kitchen, barefoot and shirtless, taking swigs directly from a bottle of water. His body glistened with the remnants of the shower, the muscles in his back taut and shifting subtly as he pivoted in my direction. "Are you really just going to stand there and gaze?" he inquired, a smirk playing on his lips as he placed the bottle on the table. I folded my arms, resting against the counter, my robe draped casually around me. "Perhaps," Julian let out a soft laugh, shaking his head as he moved in. Closer. His hands settled on my hips, warm and undeniably possessive, drawing me closer to him. "You're getting spoiled," he murmured, his lips grazing my temple. A sly smile crept across my face. "And to whom does the blame belong?" His fingers curled ever so gently, his breath a warm whisper against my ear. "It belongs to me," he confessed. His lips descended along my neck, measured and intentional, while his hands slipped beneath my robe, fingers exploring every contour of my skin. I released a breath as his hold adjusted, leading me onto the kitchen counter, his form settling between my legs as if it were meant to be. And at this moment, he did. It evolved into a ritual, a cadence we both embraced without hesitation. He returned from work, weary yet perpetually prepared for my presence, his body taut until he enveloped me in his embrace. The nights unfolded with a gentle pace, stretching out in a tapestry of soft laughter and playful caresses. Mornings unfolded with a languid grace, sheets entwined and kisses taken in secret, my fingers gliding along the line of his jaw as he drew me nearer, deeper, reluctant to release the moment just yet. We never delved into what this truly was. There was no necessity for that. He had ceased to pay rent months prior, yet we both understood that he had secured his position here through other means. What's the most delightful aspect? Neither of us wished for it to conclude. One evening, as we reclined in bed, the San Francisco skyline shimmering softly through the window, Julian turned toward me, propped on his elbow, his dark eyes examining me in the muted glow. "Have you ever pondered the words that might escape their lips?" he inquired, his tone soft and contemplative. I glided my fingers over his arm, following the contours of his muscles. "Are you feeling concerned?" He wore a sly grin. "Not at all, merely inquisitive." I shrugged, drawing him closer until our lips were nearly touching. "Allow them to speak." Julian breathed softly against my lips, his hand gliding up my thigh, his grip intimate, assured, and understanding. "I adore the way your mind works," he whispered. In an instant, he drew me beneath him, pressing me into the sheets, solidifying all that we understood but had never voiced. Julian remains here, sharing my bed each night, rousing me in the morning with gentle kisses and warm hands that linger, unwilling to release their hold. And if this is incorrect, I have no desire to amend it.